Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Syngenta Canada, Alberta Wheat Commission, and C&M Seeds.
Welcome to Real Agriculture's Wheat School series. I'm Kara Oosterhuis. In this episode, I talked to Bob Blackshaw, who is a wheat scientist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Bob and I talk at Farming Smarter's Plot Hop in Lethbridge, Alberta, about what some of the misconceptions are when it comes to herbicide resistance, as well as what the number one resistant weed is in Western Canada.
So resistance is not a new phenomena, but it's been increasing over the years, and it's primarily present in the areas where we grow our crops. So the worst weed resistance problems are in Ontario and Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, where we grow our crops and where we use our herbicides, and obviously that's where we have selection pressure for resistance, and that's where the resistance problems are.
So what are the major weeds in Western Canada?
The most economically important weed is wild oat, and it's the one that causes the biggest yield losses in our crops, and it's the one that farmers probably pay attention to the most and spray the most herbicide on, and because of that, it's our number one weed in terms of resistance problems.
So then, does the resistance come from the spraying, or does it come from mutations within the genes?
Yeah, so that's a sort of confusing issue. In the early days of resistance, we didn't know, but now we do know the answer to that question. And it's the resistance is already there in the population before we spray the herbicide, and that's just a low-level natural mutation rate that happens. And for some of the resistance situation, that's 1 in a million plants, or even 1 in 10 million plants has that gene. And then we spray our herbicide, and most of the other weeds in the population die, but that one survives and sets seed, and many of our weeds can produce 10 to 20,000 seeds per plant, and then you can see that over a few years the numbers can increase quite dramatically.
So which weeds so far are you seeing being resistant to glyphosate?
In Western Canada, the only weed that we have confirmed that's resistant to glyphosate is kochia. And so that's predominantly a weed of importance in southern Alberta and southern Saskatchewan, but there are a few problems in Manitoba as well. In Ontario, they have 4 weed species that are resistant to glyphosate, but they're weeds that we commonly don't have here in Western Canada.
With resistance, do you think sometimes we're overspraying when it comes to like Roundup Ready canola, Roundup on Roundup Ready canola? Do you think sometimes we're going for that second spray just because we have the technology available?
Yeah, I think we have to be very targeted in how we use our herbicides and how frequently we use them, and then can we use something else, either use a different herbicide or use 2 herbicides together. So the example in our no-till systems, we use glyphosate quite widely to control weeds in our no-till fields before seeding. And we used to only use glyphosate, where now I think many people are adding something else to the glyphosate, and so that's a very good standard practice, and I encourage everybody to do that. If we were to talk about in-crop applications and Roundup Ready canola, you know, everybody's going to be applying it once. I mean, that's why you've bought the seed, and you know, and it's very effective. So then the decision becomes, you know, is a second application warranted? And I think if you have a lot of weeds in your field as a second flush, then probably yes, or there may be some perennial weeds that weren't present at your first application, and so you may want to go in at that time. But in other cases, it may not be warranted. If you have a very good crop stand, that crop canopy will close in and shade out that second weed flush, and the yield losses will be minimal. And so you may not be spending a lot of money on that second application, but each time you apply Roundup, you are increasing the selection pressure. And so that's a trade-off, a balance that you have to decide on yourself and your own farm, really each field you have to make that decision.
And how long does it typically take to identify a weed that is herbicide resistant?
Yeah, so when we have the scientific community has some modeling that they use to make predictions on what weeds are susceptible to resistance and what herbicides are more susceptible to have resistance develop to them, and that gives us some rough ideas. But what we really found over the years, in reality, it's very hard to predict, and it really comes down to farmers themselves. He or she sees a patch in their field, or maybe working with their agronomist or their advisor, and they see something that looks abnormal, and then they should be collect some plants or some seed from that plants, and then send it off for testing for resistance. So really, as a scientific community and crop advisory community, we're usually behind. So the resistance is usually present in the field for 2, 3, 4 years, maybe before we're aware of it. And that's too bad, because the sooner we know about it, the sooner we could be proactive and do something about it.
So where should farmers go when they're seeing this resistance? Like, who should they be telling, and what?
I think for most farmers, their first line of contact is either they have a crop advisor that they're working with all the time, or they should contact probably their retail outlet where they're buying their seed, where they're buying their fertilizer and their pesticide products. Most of those people are very knowledgeable, very good, and that should be their first line of contact. And then those people will often know who to contact after that, whether that be a provincial government or federal government person, or in some cases there's some private labs that you can send plants to or send seed to get tested.